Andrei Zagorodnyuk is Ukraine's former defense minister and an advisor to the current government. He joins us live from the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. Andrei, thank you so much for joining us today. So you heard the Russian allegations blaming Ukraine for this. What is Ukraine's response? Was Ukraine responsible?
Well, obviously, I mean, there is absolutely no point for Ukraine to do anything like that. And for us, it's been shocking that, that happened. Then it was shocking how cynically Russia is blaming us. And then, to be honest, it was pretty shocking how many news and media picked up this and started to call it a blame game, basically putting on the same footing the truth and propaganda and saying that we pointing fingers and all that sort of stuff. I mean, for us, it's really difficult because it's ecological catastrophe in Ukraine. There's lots of houses, people, I mean, without homes and so on, and it's just impossible for anyone who knows Ukrainian policy and Ukrainian people. It's just absolutely impossible to think that we can do this with our own population. I mean, because of the so.
It is understandable. It is understandable given Russia's history and its list of war crimes committed over the past year to be skeptical about their response to who is to blame here. Do you have evidence, though, to point to Russia as the culprit?
Well, first of all, there is no reason for Ukraine to do that because we gain nothing out of this, like whatsoever. The disruption of water supply to Crimea is not going to impact literally anything because, as you might remember, there hasn't been supplies to Crimea of the water for some years, and Russians still occupied Crimea and they still prepared it for the invasion and so on. So it's not going to disrupt any military situation. However, it's going to seriously disrupt Ukrainian military offensive because it creates a massive barrier from the side of Kherson and Dnipro River, which would be almost impossible to cross with the land operation. And of course, the dam was under the occupation of Russians, so they controlled the dam. There has been a battalion of Russian army standing there full time, like 24/7. It's been on your occupied territory, so Ukrainian forces did not control it. It was heavily fortified by Russian soldiers, and so they had a full access to this. We didn't have any access.
Yeah, you mentioned the impact that this could have to the counteroffensive, which is believed to be underway now. And obviously, Ukraine is not disclosing its military planning, but there are military experts who would have expected one of the big goals to sever that land bridge connecting Crimea to Ukraine. This would raise questions about the possibility of that happening, at least as quickly as Ukraine would like to see happen. Are there contingency plans in the work, given that this played out the way it did today?
Of course, and there's been a whole number of scenarios for the counteroffensive, so I'm sure that our armed forces will switch to some other one. But indeed, that complicates the situation in the south of the country, particularly around Crimea. Because if you look at the map, there is a whole massive piece of land around the Crimean Peninsula on the top of it, which access to that piece of land from the west, basically, that's where the flooding happens, is like completely blocked. So indeed, there's been only a couple crossings through the Crimea in that area, and they don't exist anymore. So yes, we need to do some changes. Yes.
Yeah. Is there a chance that this could have been a natural breach, given the damage that we reported had recently been done to this dam just a few days ago?
Well, there needs to be an investigation, but we have seen the explosions. I'm sure that there will be videos from satellites. There would be evidences of the witnesses and so on. But there is like a very strong chance that we have seen a real video from the explosion. So it obviously was man-made.
The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, as you know, relies on the water flow from the reservoir upstream to cool its reactors. Now, the IAEA says there's, quote, no immediate nuclear safety risk at the plant right now, but it is monitoring the situation. How concerned are you about the water levels there at the reactor?
Not a nuclear specialist, but what our specialist is saying right now, that indeed it is concerning. The discussion of Russians possibly could have been exploding the dam since last year. There's been lots of articles and studies since last year because we kind of understood that this is one of the key risks. And yes, there is a certain risk. I'm sure it's manageable, but it definitely complicates situation, which is another argument in terms of like that Russians would benefit from this, but Ukraine like have no benefit from this situation like whatsoever at all.
What are your biggest concerns, given your military background, in terms of the setback this could have on the counteroffensive?
To be honest, I mean, we're quite well prepared for the counteroffensive. I don't think that will disrupt our plans completely. I mean, I think that there would be some changes, there would be some adjustments. I think that Russians are quite panicking, and they also have lack of forces. So perhaps they will move forces out from from the flooded areas. Particularly, they would feel that that area is kind of safer because it will, of difficult access. So they would move them to some other direction, and that may somehow impact our plans, but not cancel them completely.
The flood obviously is a humanitarian tragedy as well, and one that could impact the country's grain industry and agricultural industries. Kyiv is one of the biggest sources for its revenue and also a grain supplier for the world. What are some of the concerns you have on that front?
Well, there's obviously is an ecological like catastrophe. It's environmental technological disaster. So certainly there would be a massive infrastructural consequences for this, which we only now trying to assess. There's already pollution from the nearby like oil terminals, like small oil stations, which now all this oil is getting to the water. So obviously it's an environmental issue, very substantial, and so proper like logistics and proper trading and agriculture in that whole area would be severely impacted. It's difficult after like less than 24 hours to assess that, but from what we see already, it's of course it's a substantial damage.
The consequences could be substantial, as you just noted, and just looking at these images, they're horrifying. Even those that had gamed out the likelihood that this dam could be breached last year didn't expect water levels to be as high as they are right now. So this is, of course, a serious concern here. Let me ask you about the war from a broader perspective, and that is the ultimate goal of the country after the end of this war, after Ukraine's victory, to join NATO. And that is a pursuit that the leaders of the country, that President Zelensky and you yourself continue to make. You write in Foreign Affairs, this article, to protect Europe, let Ukraine join NATO right now. It is time then to let Ukraine join, not sooner or later, but now. By entering the alliance, the country will secure its future as part of the West, and it can be sure the United States and Europe will continue to help it fight against Moscow. Europe, too, will reap security benefits by allowing Ukraine to join the alliance. It is now apparent that the continent is not ready to defend itself and that its politicians have largely overestimated its security. Indeed, Europe will never be secure from Russia until it can militarily stop Moscow's attacks, and no state is more qualified to do so than Ukraine. You make a compelling argument in this piece, but are you worried that it is one that is falling on deaf ears? Because it does appear that the majority of NATO members seem to be tiptoeing around this issue.
At the moment, yes, well, thank you. And at the moment, I think that, yes, they're not ready. And I think that we are, with the articles and with the expert discussions, we're just building up that arguments and discussing this with expert community, with policymakers. And I think at some time, European and Western generally policymakers will understand that Russia is a threat to not just to Ukraine. It's not a regional conflict. It's a substantial conflict of a much broader scale. Also, they'll understand that the capabilities currently present in Eastern Europe are not enough. And they are helping up to build a very strong Ukrainian army. So since they're investing money and the resources in this army, why don't plan that this army would be protecting the whole Eastern Europe, not just Ukraine? And in this case, it would make sense to accept it in the alliance. I don't think that's going to happen like tomorrow or even during Vilnius summit, which is in 1 month. But I think that by having this discussion over and over again, we'll get closer to that.
Andrei Zagorodnyuk, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll continue to follow the latest headlines after this dam breach. Thank you.